February 14th, 2013. And this is Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day to everyone listening, and we do appreciate you. We are live here on WCHE 1520 AM radio, and we have a great show for you today. We have two school board members, Sean Carpenter of the Westchester School Board and Simon Campbell of the Pennsbury School Board. Now, these guys have a lot in common, but they also have some differences, and they'll get a chance to share them with us today. Sean Carpenter has been a member of the school board in Westchester for about 2 or 3 years now, and he'll be getting ready to run for re-election here in November. And Simon Campbell has been a member of his school board in Pennsbury for a number of years. So what I'd like to do to start this discussion is have both of them give us a little bit of a bio and a motivation of why they wanted to get into the school board. And we're going to start with Simon Campbell. So Simon Campbell is kind of public enemy number one to the union bosses in that he is the founder of the no strike proposition and has been very tough on in his school district on negotiating with the teachers union. And Sean Carpenter also has been a public enemy. The both of them have been kind of demonized by the various school districts. But we're going to start off with Simon. Simon, tell us a little bit about what got you going, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Rich, how are you? Thanks for having me on. I liked your intro, by the way. What did you say, number one public enemy for the unions? That just means I exceeded Darryl Metcalf. So I hope if Darryl's listening, he's feeling jealous. What got me going? What got me going, Rich, was back in 2005, just moved to the United States, lived in Europe for many years, and there was a teacher strike in my local district in Pennsbury. It lasted a full calendar month. The union hit the picket line for a month, and they were demanding more salaries and benefits, the usual thing. And at the time of the strike, the Pennsbury teachers were the 7th highest paid on average in the entire state of Pennsylvania, 500 districts. And the usual nonsense, you know, they were demanding more money because their neighbors in the next district were making more. The union loved to play this game of round robin. So I kind of got the hump with them. I didn't even realize that, you know, there was such a thing as teacher strikes, you know, in Switzerland where we'd moved from. They kind of believe in teaching kids to speak 3 languages fluently rather than throwing them out of school. So I got going and decided, you know, to form an advocacy group. We did that. We found out that 37 other states banned teacher strikes, so I don't know why we still have them here. A couple of years later, I became a United States citizen, a few years later, and decided to do something very foolish, run for school board, the kind of public office that doesn't pay you anything. So I ran for school board. At the time of the campaign, you know, the folks in the political parties were saying things like, you know, you can't speak out too much against the union, you'll never get elected, so on and so forth. And I really didn't care. I'm just like, I'm going to run on what I believe in. And if the bigwigs in the Bucks County GOP don't like it, you know, because I'm a Republican, I don't care what they think either. So me and my running mate ran, and it turned out we won every single voting precinct, including all the Democrat ones, on a very strong platform against the union. And now I'm in my 3rd or is it 4th year as a board director, and some people have talked me into running again. So I must be crazy a second time around. So that's how I ended up being a school board director.
All right. Well, that's a great introduction. And now, Sean Carpenter, why don't you tell us a little bit about your bio and what got you interested in being a school board member here in Westchester?
Sure. Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me on. I recently started another small business. I have this this predilection for wanting to do my own thing and wanting to start businesses. This is the second time around for me doing this, but my background is roughly in IT, and I also do some artistic work as a photographer. This is my 4th year as well. Simon and I actually ran at the same time 4 years ago, and it looks like we're going to be running at the same time again this year. And, you know, it was at a time when I think, as you know, I was trying to get involved and trying to do something as far as community involvement goes. And school board is definitely one where you can have a pretty big impact. You know, I'm a big fan of local government, and, you know, I think the more local and the more touchable the government, the more responsive and the better it's going to be. So, you know, I felt like I could make a difference there, and I think I have. I think from right away, there was a change in tenor on the board, and I think we've seen some real results in the last 4 years. Looking forward to 4 more.
All right. Well, as I said, both of you guys have been targets of the union bosses. I know last week there was a letter to the editor in the Daily Local News, the local paper here in Chester County, and both Sean Carpenter and Simon Campbell were criticized by the author of this letter to the editor. Do you want to talk about that, Sean? And I think you immediately sent back a reply. So do you want to talk about that letter to the editor last week?
Yeah, I do. And there was a letter in. It pointed to my involvement to a meeting that I held, I think it's 3 years ago at this point, to highlight the problems with the pension and the impending financial crisis that was coming from increased pension costs. I think the accusation in there was that I was harassing teachers. I forget the exact verbiage, sorry, by highlighting the issue. And really it was nothing of the sort. It was we have to face reality that pension costs are going to be 16% of overall salaries for school districts starting next year, and they're going to jump up to over 25%. So, I've been consistently trying to get the message out on this. I was at the governor's press conference earlier this week to talk about some of the pension reform and some of the plan that he has for privatization of liquor sales. So, I think this is something that we need to get out, and we need to constantly be trumpeting.
All right, and then what did you write in your reply to this letter?
Well, I think that was just about it. That this is a crisis. This is something we should be talking about. This is something that should be on the forefront of everyone's minds. There was another op-ed previously that I don't think mentioned Simon, but it also kind of inferred that a defined benefit plan was more economical than a defined contribution plan. So, a pension is cheaper than a 401k, and I think he was, not exactly being realistic with the numbers that he was presenting for that fact.
Simon, do you remember how you reacted when you heard that you were mentioned in this letter to the editor?
Is that the one where I was told off for complaining that the Westchester School Board were a bunch of rhinos signing off on forced unionism contracts? Possibly. There's a bunch of people in Chester County, Rich, aside from the liberal Democrats that don't like me because they're all mobbed up with the unions, but the establishment in the Chester County Republican Party aren't too fond of me either, because I tend to be very vocal about some of the misdeeds that have been going on in the Westchester area school district with some of these votes for forced union dues. There's 9 elected school board directors. People forget this. And only one of them, one of Sean's colleagues, Heidi Adset, has voted against forced unionism at Westchester. And there's a lot of issues that percolate together and that will bounce off of another, whether you're talking the pension thing. And by the way, that committee that Sean was talking about with the governor, listen, that's a waste of time. The governor wants to try to sell off the liquor stores, and my understanding is to his cronies, not even free market liquor stores, in order to pump more money back into the public school system instead of reforming it. And this is what the problem that we have is. We have folks that are clicked up with the establishment that don't want to advocate for real structural reform. And when you don't advocate for real structural reform, you become part of the problem. So when you ask me, Rich, who's criticizing me in the media, I'm like, who are you talking about? Either the wild-eyed left or the Republican rhino establishment, because to me they're all the same.
Okay, so I just want to kind of lay out the groundwork of this. We're going to have a break every 15 minutes, and in the meantime, I sort of want to let this be sort of a Lincoln Douglas style. We're going to keep track of the time here, so you both have equal time. But Sean, I'm going to, like I said, at quarter after, and at 1:30, and at 1:45, we'll be taking breaks, so you guys know. But feel free to, feel free to counter anything you hear, or maybe quantify whatever you've heard. So
sure. I'm going to try to stay positive throughout this phone call. I don't think that me attacking Simon is going to do anybody any good, because I think that's just not the approach that I'd like to take. I wish that he would take that approach with me, but...
Hey, sure, can I just chime in? I don't want to interrupt you, but I think every public official needs to be held accountable for their public votes. We are, when we push a button...
We don't call people names.
I'm not calling you names. I'm criticizing you, Sean, for your vote, public vote, as a public official, for signing off on forced unionism contracts when we're trying to pass a right-to-work law in Pennsylvania. You didn't have to do it. Now, you can't duck away from a public vote. I mean, I'm accountable for my votes at Pennsbury. You're accountable for yours. And I think it is only reasonable, as an elected official, to expect that the public are going to scrutinize what we vote on, analyze the reasons why we vote on it, and discuss it. I think that's fair game.
Oh, sure. That happens with every single vote that we take.
Correct.
We have people on all sides of the issues that will scrutinize every single thing that we say and do. It doesn't mean that, the name-calling is justified.
There's no name-calling here, Sean.
We'll move on from there. I think the main point that I wanted to make in rebuttal to Simon is that his suggestion that we do or don't do something is... Simon, correct me if I'm wrong, but you haven't actually removed any of the forced unionism provisions from your contract, right?
As well you know, current state law does not allow a school board to impose any aspect of a contract settlement on a union. It requires agreement by the union. What I have said publicly, Sean, speaking as one elected official who is accountable to my constituents for my position, is that I will personally never vote for a compulsory unionism contract. So if the union want to take the view that they'll never sign off on one, well, I guess when it comes to my vote, they'll never get a contract, because I refuse to violate the principles of my oath of office, which is freedom of association, upholding and defending the Constitution. And when you basically, in my opinion, and this is criticism, Sean, it's fair game because it's a public vote, when you basically sell your principles in order for labor peace or for some other so-called priority, when you take a non-union employee and you say, I'm going to cast a vote in government to force you to pay union dues, even though you're not a union employee, that's not right, Sean. It's not right to do that, and that's where I have the beef.
All right, hey, we're going to leave it right there because we're going to be getting ready to take a short break. So we'll be back in about 2 minutes. And we're back. This is the Sheepdog Hour here on WCHE, where we discuss real life, real problems, real solutions. And our guests are Sean Carpenter of the Westchester School Board and Simon Campbell of the Pennsbury School Board. I just want to go into a little history, Sean. Before you ran for school board, the mix of the 9-member Westchester School Board was 8 liberals and 1 conservative, and I think that was 2008, and then you decided to run, and you and your 3 fellow Republicans ran, and you won, and that changed the mix, I believe, to 5 conservatives to 4 liberals, and then in 2010, again, you guys won, and now the current makeup of the Westchester School Board is 8 conservatives and 1 liberal.
I disagree.
All right, and Simon, I don't know, what is the mix of your school board, Simon?
Well, first
currently?
of all, Rich, I disagree with your assessment, because what you're actually talking about in technical terms is there are 8 Republicans and 1 Democrat at Westchester Area School Board.
Okay.
But you can't say that those 8 Republicans are conservatives. I would argue to this day there are still 8 liberals and 1 conservative on the Westchester Area School Board, because there's only 1 board director, Heidi Adset, who's been willing to stand up.
Point. Simon's going to call us a rhino. Simon's going to call us a liberal.
Well,
you're not going to talk about the content of what we're actually talking about. My point is that Simon Campbell, you have done nothing to remove any of those clauses from your contracts. Your unwillingness to sign a contract is irrelevant, because you and I both know that state law dictates that the union has to sign off on any agreement that removes that clause.
And the school board has to.
What are you doing
and the school
to
board
remove
has
that
to as
clause
well.
from your contract?
You're failing to forget something, Sean. We both understand state law requires an agreement to get rid of compulsory union dues. We aren't disputing state law here.
Okay.
What I'm disputing is
what are you doing to promote that? What are you doing to get that done?
What are we doing to promote it? Oh, you're kidding me, aren't you? We've done more to promote this issue at Pennsbury and around the state than anyone at Westchester, with the exception of Heidi Adsett. Because think about this, Sean. Everyone agrees, and Rich, you've heard of the Right to Work movement. Right to Work in Pennsylvania, the chief sponsor is Darrell Metcalf, would transform the state of Pennsylvania into an economic engine and protect employees' individual freedom. Those that are not union members would never be required to pay union dues. And I don't want to put words in Sean's mouth, but I believe he's a Right to Work supporter. He would support it at the state level. Well, what Right to Work would do, Rich, is say that the agreement that the Westchester Area School Board signed off on with Sean's vote for compulsory union dues, that agreement would be illegal under a Right to Work law. So if you think about it logically, Sean is kind of saying that he supports at the state level making it illegal, yet at the local level he'll vote for it. That is clearly a contradiction. If you believe in your heart and soul that compulsory unionism should be illegal, then why would you cast a vote in support of it? That's the issue that Sean won't address.
That I will address. The reason that I voted for the contract that I voted for is because it was not in my power to do anything about the clauses that you are complaining about.
Not true.
No, it is true.
Not true.
And as I understand your plan for what you'd like to see in school districts is that a lot of school districts don't sign contracts, so they don't have agreements with their respective unions, and then that somehow is going to cause some sort of clamoring that is going to change lawmakers' opinions in Harrisburg. Is that right or wrong?
That's absolutely correct, Sean. And guess who that comes from? Not just me. That comes from Darrell Metcalf, who is the chief sponsor of the Right to Work legislation in Harrisburg. And he was interviewed by Heidi Adsett on this very issue, your own colleague who voted no. And Darrell is on tape. We published it on Facebook as saying, as the sponsor, he really needs support from local elected officials willing to drive this issue through the court of public opinion. He needs people like Heidi willing to say, no, we will not get a contract settlement until you, the union, agree to get rid of compulsory dues and then drive it through the court of public opinion. When you sign off on these forced union dues contracts locally, Sean, quietly, you're not doing anything to help Darrell Metcalf, and he's on tape asking for your help, my help, and every local school board director's help. And it is incumbent upon all elected officials not to duck the issue, not to say it's someone else's problem at the state level, but to advocate for these transformational reforms that would make better Pennsylvania a liberty-minded place where people can actually get jobs. What you've done, Sean, is duck your responsibility in terms of leadership. That's the issue.
I disagree. I mean, this is exactly what Scott Walker was in Wisconsin. Scott Walker said, I acknowledge that school boards technically, the local power technically had the ability to remove some of these things or to negotiate some of these things, but in reality, they don't. So, and it's foolish to expect school boards to be able to remove a clause in a contract that's never been removed in the state of Pennsylvania ever.
Well,
so they did something about it because they could do something about it. They had the power to do something about it. Local school boards do not. And I would contend that the Westchester School District, being without a contract over this issue, is not something that would change minds to the positive for getting a right to work passed.
You are so wrong, Sean, and I'll tell you why.
Okay, one second, Simon, before you go on, gentlemen. I just want to, we're sort of keeping track of the time, and I want to give both of you equal time, and so Sean is about 2.5 minutes behind, so I want to give Sean a question, which will give him a chance to kind of catch up on the time. Now, Sean, when you guys did your contract in Westchester last time, there were other features in the contract that you felt were worth signing for, and that's why. Do you want to tell us some of the other things in your contract? What was accomplished that has convinced you?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a very fiscally responsible contract that we came to. What we did is, in a nutshell, when I describe it to people, we implemented real-world reforms to the support staff and the custodial contracts that we just agreed to. And what that means is, the taxpayers who have been paying for these all along have seen reductions in, their base health care plan. That was one thing that we included. They've seen cost sharing. They've seen cost sharing increase. So a lot of things that the real world has seen is what we implemented in this contract. And it was a significant savings to the district. It was also something that, we finally constrained all the costs that are associated with employment. So we used a total cost of ownership model as far as what the cost of the contract would be, and then, kept that within what we felt was a reasonable parameter, which was the Act 1 index. So, all of our expenses are now constrained within that index, and it includes, pension costs. So, there were a lot of very important steps in there that we took and we were proud to take.
All right, and before I turn it back over to Simon, I want to ask you, Sean, in the court of public opinion here in Westchester, how do you feel that your case has been going? Do you feel confident that the school board will remain, pretty much in Republican hands, or do you feel, I know you've done very well with your taxes. I think you didn't raise taxes at all the first year, and then I do think your second time around you did raise. You want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, no, I think that we've gotten a lot of support, and that we've been very well received. We are going to be running on the platform that essentially, we've been trying to focus on being efficient. We've been trying to, implement some of these real-world changes to education to make sure that we're spending money where it's effective, and making sure that, it's ultimately that we're going to be promoting a better outcome by promoting effectiveness and efficiency, and that, some of those things we've seen play out in the achievement of our students at our schools as well. So. Okay. We're going to continue that, and I think that we have been very well received. With the negotiations, we've done some things as well. We've been publicly mailing out letters, so we mailed to every household a negotiation update that described our position, it described the counter position. And we've kept those sorts of communications going, and, I think that we'll see that continuing as well.
Well, I think both of you make your points very well. Now, Simon, I want to give you a chance now to say a few things. It seems like in your school district, which I believe is a more Democrat stronghold than here in Chester County, Westchester.
Yep.
You have been very successful in winning over the public, a court of public opinion. So,
yeah.
Would you mind talking about that?
Yeah. Let me just back up though and talk about Sean's analysis of the support staff contracts, the forced unionism contracts that he signed off on. Those contracts, I happen to know, were pretty much negotiated. When I say negotiated, discussed internally with the former HR director. They never used a professional negotiator, which is point number one. That's a disaster. Point number two, at no time did the Westchester Area School Board even look into or solicit bids for outsourcing support staff functions. Now, we're doing this at Pensbury, right? We're doing it across multiple employee groups, transportation, busing, cleaners, paraprofessionals. We have bids from outside vendors as part of the negotiating process with the support staff union. And you better believe our support staff union are terrified, because we need to offset the pension liability. Because remember, when you have district employees, you're paying them a public salary. That ties into the pension crisis. So when you consider privatizing some of these support staff functions, you lessen the pension liability to the school district. Westchester area never even considered outsourcing their support staff functions when they settled that contract. They could have settled it much cheaper than they did, had they had the will to stand up to the union in the court of public opinion and say, we are considering outsourcing jobs. They didn't do it, Rich. Now, we're doing it at Pensbury right now. So when Sean says we've got a little bit here and a little bit there, it's tinkering around the edges, because in my opinion, that board, with the exception of Heidi Adset, isn't willing to do the hard work in the court of public opinion to communicate these ideas. And you're right, at Pensbury, we have more Democrats in Pensbury than in Westchester area. Sean says he's winning over public opinion. Let me tell you something. Look at the write-in votes for vote. That liberal group, They got thousands and thousands of write-in votes in Westchester area in the last school district election. One of them got elected. We don't have that in my district. The reason is we communicate these ideas around standing up to the bullying power of the teachers union. We articulate the issues. We don't have a paid PR consultant. We had one for a short while, but then we decided we didn't need her. And we just get out there as elected officials. You know, when I ran for election, I mean, there was 4 or 5 of the precincts that were heavy Democrat-leaning. And as a Republican, I won all of them. And I didn't do it through party support. I mean, you have to remember in Westchester area, pretty much with the Republican voter registration, if you get endorsed by the Republican establishment, you don't necessarily have to communicate these ideas in the court of public opinion because the voter registration carries you through to the general election. And the fact that you had so many write-in votes tells me that the Westchester board majority, exception of Heidi, has done a lousy job at managing public opinion because they're not strong on the issues when they're out there talking.
All right, well, we're going to leave it right there. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, Sean Carpenter will have a chance to respond. And thank you for tuning in. It's 1:32. And we're back. This is the Sheepdog Hour here on WCHE 1520 AM radio, and we're talking to Sean Carpenter of the Westchester School Board and Simon Campbell of the Pennsbury School Board. So Simon had quite a few things there to say about digging your feet in there, Sean. So do you want to respond now?
Yeah. So, Simon was talking about what happened 2 years ago in the election, not in my election, but in the off-year election. And I mean, the only thing I can point to is ultimately what the quote-unquote establishment that Simon likes to point out tried to do is, their last gasp was a robocall that Heidi Adset recorded that talked about not giving in to union bosses. So, it's hard for me to sit and listen to Simon's criticisms of what, the Republican Party did or didn't do, what they did or didn't embrace, what message they were putting out, when clearly they were putting out Simon's message. It just wasn't one that, there were numerous criticisms that all of us could have had or didn't have with really every election.
All right, well, I
think they're irrelevant. I think that we had to weigh, the positive of what we were doing against some of the things that, maybe we would have hoped to have seen, but we really didn't think that we had a chance to get.
All right, well, let me ask you a question. I know I had a discussion with Val DiGiorgio. He is the chairman of the Chester County Republican Party, and we were talking about this oppressive labor law, which requires people to be mandatory membership in a union and then mandatory deduction of their union dues. And, I believe that, maybe the state should do it, but Val DiGiorgio told me that the Westchester School Board should dig in their heels and negotiate it into the contract. So, Sean, I'm just curious, what is your opinion of has Val DiGiorgio ever sat down with you guys and said, hey, you guys can do this? He made it. I'm asking the question sort of in with a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing because, Val made it sound like, oh, this is very easy to do. All you got to do is, dig in your feet, and the teachers' bosses, the union bosses, will cave, and they will sign a contract, and then you don't have to wait for Dominic Pileggi or the state legislator to do anything. And so, so what do you say? What do you say to Val DiGiorgio? Has he ever sat down with you? And how do you feel about it?
I think it's unfair to criticize Val for the write-in election 2 years ago or for being a quote-unquote establishment. Like I said, he employed, Heidi Adset doing a robocall that talked about, don't let the union bosses take over this election. So, I think the criticism there is completely unfounded. He did, what I think exactly Simon would have wanted him to do.
Can I chime in, Rich?
Yes, please.
Let me just say, I'm almost shaking my head at disbelief at this point, Rich, really. First of all, I'll talk about Val DiGiorgio and the Chester County Party in a second, but Sean is complaining about Heidi Adset making a robocall. Let me just not complain.
No, I'm not complaining about it.
No, you're making the point. Wait a minute, Sean. Let me finish.
Say that they don't do what you want.
Let me explain public opinion to you, okay? Point number one. If anyone asked Heidi Adsett to make a robocall against the unions, it's because they didn't figure anyone else had the balls to do it. That's point number one. Point number two is one robocall does not make an election. When we're talking about public opinion and what caused thousands and thousands of write-in votes from that liberal group, the chaos at the county courthouse, it was because the incumbent majority, you guys, Sean, failure to deliver public opinion ahead of the elections. An election is not decided on one robocall, and I think Heidi would probably make that robocall no matter who asked her. But the point is this, you talked about what the Republican Party was doing or not doing in 2011. Let me tell you something. I'm a Republican. I couldn't care less what the Republican Party is doing or not doing. They don't run my campaigns or anyone else at Pensbury's campaigns. We're independent-minded citizen advocates who've been championing these issues in the court of public opinion. You guys talk about the party. I don't care about the party.
I'm only talking about it because you're criticizing it.
Well, I'm criticizing you and the party.
But that's totally fine.
Because, you know, Sean, if you don't get endorsed by the party in the primaries, you think you'd win? Are you kidding? Come on, and this is the problem with the whole system here. We compete on ideas. We get endorsed by the public. I even heard a story that you and Vince were not summoned, but asked to talk to Val DiGiorgio about the teacher's contract. Is that true?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, did you and Vince have a meeting with Val DiGiorgio to talk about the teacher's contract at Westchester area?
Vince and I did not have a meeting with Val DiGiorgio.
So you've never discussed it with him?
What do you mean?
Have you ever discussed the negotiations with the chairman of the county GOP, yes or no?
I think that I'm discussing it with everyone in the public right now.
Have you discussed it personally?
I've had conversations with a lot of people.
Come on, Sean, don't duck. Have you personally discussed the negotiations with the county chair GOP, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Let me clue the listeners into an issue here. The chair of the Bucks County GOP is Pat Poprick. I don't discuss what goes on at Pensbury with any bigwig inside the Republican Party. If they even called me, I'd say, are you a Pensbury resident? Do you live here? Do you pay taxes here? The problem that we have here, Rich, is that we have Republicans that get in office and think it's their job to discuss something with someone. Is Val DiGiorgio a resident of Westchester area? What's it got to do with him if he's not a resident? What's his business? He doesn't pay taxes if he doesn't live there. Why are you talking to non-residents? This is the problem we have, Rich. We have people not willing to stand on principle, people willing to go along with the party and blame other people for the lack of public opinion.
Well, if he wanted to tell them how they could win the because he told me that by all means, I mean, he made it sound so simple, Simon. He said, you know what, if the school board would just tell them that they want this in the contract, that we're not going to deduct your dues for you anymore and send them to the union, they should be able to do it. So I thought, well, geez, if it's that easy, if he's so confident, you know, I think he should talk to them and tell them how to do it, because I had some heart-to-hearts with some of the school board members, and they felt like it's not that easy to do, and it
isn't. So it isn't easy to do, and I'll disagree with DiGiorgio on that. But once again, what we have here, Rich, is everyone else passing the buck. DiGiorgio saying, well, you know, I think those local guys should stand up and do it. Sean's saying, well, and I agree with him, you can't do it unilaterally, and nobody's standing up and saying we need to pass a right-to-work law, support Darrell Metcalf, get the public educated on this issue. And this is the problem in Chester County. It's the go-along-to-get-along attitude instead of focusing on the citizenry, the constituents of that school district. That support staff contract could have been negotiated for a much lower price had privatization been looked at and bids solicited. There was no need for those school board Republicans to sign off on forced unionism. There's no need for the Westchester vote crowd to get a person elected on a writing candidate. We have a failure of leadership in the Republican Party, and with 7 out of the 8 Republicans on that school board. Thank God for Heidi Adsett.
All right. Hey, Sean, if you don't have a response right now, we do have a caller. Would you guys like to take a caller and both of you can respond?
Sure.
All right. I think the caller is Helen. Helen, welcome to the show.
Yes, hi, Rich. I'm a resident of the Westchester District. As far as Val DiGiorgio, I shook my head when you said what he said about it being so easy. Mm-hmm. Val DiGiorgio, when we ran somebody against Pileggi, and that bill, Right to Work, will never get to the floor in the Senate with Pileggi there. We were pointing out that Pileggi was union-controlled. They had a large sign of the union in Aston little sign they had supporting Obama. They had a huge sign that was electrical workers supporting Pileggi. We were pointing out at that time when we ran somebody against him in the campaign that he's union-controlled.
Right.
And Val DiGiorgio dug in his heels. So I don't believe anything Val DiGiorgio says. And as far as collecting money for the union dues, this is nothing more than a money laundering operation which the public is being forced to participate in. I don't even know how it's legal.
Yeah.
But that money is used, and it was used in large part, to elect Obama to office and every other liberal candidate. And I'm sorry, Sean, there's no excuse. None.
All right, Helen, appreciate your comments, but did you have any other question, or did you just want to get that off your chest there?
Does Sean ever think there's a possibility that we could stop participating in the money laundering operation with our facilities in the Westchester District? Does he think there's ever a possibility that this will happen?
I am a right to work proponent. I think that it's undeniable that the right to work states are better states economically, and they're better states to live in. So that is, I think, what we'd all like to see.
Well,
we're not going to see it unless we get some people in office.
Well, we're not going to see it, Helen, unless there's a grassroots uprising from citizen activists like yourself, and God bless you, but also local elected officials. So when Sean says, he supports a right-to-work law, what he is saying in a legal sense is that he supports making his own voluntary decision illegal, because he signed off on a forced union dues contract. He said yes to it when the law says he could vote no to it. He wants to make his own decisions illegal. I don't know how, as an elected official, you compromise your principles to that extent. I think Val DiGiorgio is full of it when he says, trying to pass the buck down the line. That guy is processing money through Dominic Pileggi, the union money coming in from Delaware County. It funnels down to the Chester County Republicans. Meanwhile, we've got school board directors like Sean talking to this guy, and who knows what they're saying. Well, the whole thing is wrong here, Rich. It's only people like Heidi that go directly to the public and say, here's what's going on. I'm voting no for this reason. And she's taken more heat on that school board than any other of these so-called Republicans, precisely because she engages the public. And it is only through engaging the public, through all the means we can, that we're going to see any real reform in Pennsylvania.
Rich, thank you for having the program.
Hey, thank you for calling in, Helen. And with that, Sean, I want to hear your response, and you're behind by about 3 minutes in time, so I want you to be able to take your time, get your money's worth here on the Sheepdog Hour. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a couple minutes. And we're back for the final 12 minutes of the show. Sean, I want to give you a chance to catch up on some time here, and also to make your points here. You've said that you don't want. It's very difficult, and it's almost impossible, in your opinion, that the union bosses will sign a contract that does not include the school district collecting the dues, and so you would like it to be more of a right to work, from the state, that they pass a law, and a lot of people agree with that if the state would pass a law, then the burden is removed. And then Simon's side is that you really need to work from the bottom up. He's doing it in Pennsbury now for 3 consecutive years. The teachers have had to work with the status quo, meaning the old contract. And Simon believes that if he can get another school district to sort of dig their feet in like his own, that he doesn't become twice as strong in the fight, that they're 5 times as strong. They're stronger. And so that's his approach. And if I'm wrong on that, Simon, you can get a chance to say later. But so, Sean, why don't you tell us why that you're a right-to-work guy, and some of the other good things that you've done in that you're proud of in the contracts that you've done, and why you don't want to.
Well, I'll start with this. Okay. I think that I agree that it's through the grassroots activism that we're going to elicit some sort of change. I think the way we do that, though, is by building and strengthening alliances. It isn't by fighting with one another, and especially not, with using some of the name calling and some of the other stuff that Simon has employed over the last 6 months.
No name calling.
If anything, it's reduced your influence on people like me, because quite frankly, it's something that now I can ignore. And I also think that we've somehow turned this into a conversation about Val DeGiorgio, and Val doesn't have any more influence over what happens in the Westchester School District as he does over, Unionville or Kennett or Great Valley. When I'm sure that he's interested in what's going on in all of the districts in the county, and as someone who is we're openly publicizing what offer we have on the table, I think it's fair that we can say that we speak to everyone about what's in our contracts and our negotiations. So, I think ultimately it is just about that. It's that, we do need to be allies. We need to strengthen one another, and we need to stay positive about what the message is. I think all of the negativity around saying that, essentially there's 8 Democrats on the Westchester board. Well, that's not helping anyone, and that's not promoting anyone, coming to any sort of conclusion to a conservative standpoint.
Well, I was the one that brought up Val DeGiorgio to begin with, and I only did it because, as I said, he made it sound, he was so strong on his statement that, boy, if they would only, hold the line on the school district, they could easily negotiate this into the contract. And I just felt like, okay, if it's so easy, But anyway, so he's more in line with Simon on that, but I just don't know if he is or not. Yeah, and if you don't mind, Simon, I just want to give Sean a couple more minutes. Sean, I'm going to ask you a question about prevailing wage, because I know you articulate that pretty good, and I want to know, how does prevailing wage affect your budget in real numbers?
Yeah, gosh, I forget the actual numbers. We had our facilities operations manager pull those numbers, but it's in the, I think they say 10 to 30% of construction costs. So, as we're renovating all of our elementary schools, you're looking at somewhere close to $30 million that prevailing wage is adding to the cost of the construction that we're doing. So.
That's a lot of money that can go back into the union's pockets and be spread around to politicians, isn't it, Sean? Prevailing wage is really killing us.
Yeah, $30 million over 14 years. And it is something that we, at a school board level, we passed a resolution unanimously, at least I believe it was unanimously, about prevailing wage and about, eliminating that from school districts having to have prevailing wage on their facilities contract.
And Simon, what's your position on the prevailing wage side of things?
It clearly is adding needless costs onto the cost of public construction. Our business manager tells me we've probably spent an additional $10 million of public money on the construction projects over the last 10 years at Pensbury because of that requirement in law. And again, that's one of the things that we champion. We passed a prevailing, we're demanding that the legislature end prevailing wage. We've also done that with many other state issues that impact our constituents locally. We've demanded that the state government pass a ban on teacher strikes. I know that the Westchester Area Board has still not done that. They haven't passed a resolution demanding the same thing. And again, it all comes down to the same principle here, Rich, which is you got to be willing. I think, Sean, what I'm hearing is he's taking the view, these things need to change at the state level, but those guys really need to do it. And while I'll talk about it on a local radio show, I don't want to put my neck out there publicly. And when we've heard about, phone calls with Val DeGiorgio, and, that to me is politicization, because I think you do have to talk to everybody. But everybody, when you're a Westchester Area School Board director, that means everybody in the Westchester Area School District. Unless that guy is a taxpayer in the district, I don't know what business it is he's on the phone or in person talking to Sean. It makes you wonder, what deals have been struck with respect to what folks like Sean say publicly, in terms of going through the endorsement process. My whole thing here. Say that as you're having a conversation with me. Well, yeah, but I don't discuss the teacher contract negotiations with the county chairwoman of Bucks County. Or in fact,
Simon, give Sean a chance to respond.
Yeah, Simon, you expect to have conversations with me about it. You're having a conversation right now with me about it. It's public knowledge. You're implying that somehow Val was involved in the strategy or any of the internal negotiation. That's patently untrue.
What I'm suggesting,
he gets the exact same information that any other member of the public gets.
He also
There's
controls...
absolutely zero insider business going on.
You also have to go before him and please him if you wish to get the endorsement. Okay? That's just the way that the process works.
Patently untrue.
All right, hey, Simon and Sean, we do have a caller, so I'd like to welcome the caller in. His name is Bill. Bill, welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody. I hope everybody has a good day. Before I get started, I'll say I've been a liberal Republican for over 50 years, and I'm three areas I told Brent I wanted to speak on. As far as strikes and as far as membership in the unions go, the people that don't want to belong to the unions, it's not that they're against unions. They just don't want to. The teachers and everybody else, they don't want to pay the dues, but they want all the benefits. They want the union to negotiate their contracts, and I believe in the prevailing wages because you're just going to look for cheap labor, and people that aren't as qualified, they'll go someplace else if you don't have a prevailing wage, and you'll get lower. I'm not only talking about it happens in every industry, and as far as strikes go, if you did what baseball does and have the either-or situation come up, you could eliminate the strikes altogether very easily in Pennsylvania. But the school boards don't want to do that; they'll never go for it. And the other thing is,
hurry up, Bill.
Yeah.
We're running out of time.
Okay, the other thing is the school boards forcing the legislature a decade ago has put us in the pension situation we were in. We've gotten into now because they got their payments down almost to nothing and relied on the earnings, where the teachers always contributed to the pension system in their whatever they were required to contribute.
All right, Bill. Thank you for your question. I'm going to give each guy a chance to respond here. You got about 1 minute each. Sean, you go first.
I actually think Simon would be good at responding to this one.
Well, I just think it's interesting how this caller described himself as a liberal Republican, and if he's registered Republican, he clearly is very liberal. So I find it somewhat ironic that when I use the term liberal to describe some of the board directors at Westchester area, that Sean would argue with me with that. There is clearly such a thing as a liberal Republican and a conservative Democrat. I think what I tend to focus on, Rich, is the issues. That guy is just wrong, because when we're spending $10 million more on public construction than the market wage, that's money we can't put into the classroom for the children. It's money that has to get pumped on the back of property taxes.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to strikes, you know what? Nobody should be allowed to strike against children's interests. They're innocent, and 37 other states have guaranteed their children the right to a strike-free education. What we need to be doing is countering that caller's argument vigorously in the court of public opinion. We should publish all the teachers' names and salaries on the school district website because it's public information. Westchester area still hasn't done that because of the liberal Republican majority. We've done it at Pennsbury, and what we need to do is champion these issues at all levels from the bottom up.
And I'll add to that were brought up. It was 2001 when legislation changed what the outlays were for the pension. And that did, in fact, lead to the current crisis, as well as the underfunding schemes. But I think that was more of an Ed Rendell deliberate underfunding, because you remember the state has to pay half of the pension. So it was a politically manufactured crisis indeed. That's why we should get out of pensions and move to defined contribution plan.
All right, well, we're coming to the end of the show, so I want to thank Simon Campbell of the Pennsbury School District and Sean Carpenter